What are the questions that you haven't been asked?
Oh, that's kind of hard to say. They tend to follow a pattern of why are some people successful and why are others not, and so forth. And I've been asked about my childhood many times, and sometimes I don't think often enough people ask who influenced me, besides Napoleon Hill. But I had other influence of other people. I've been blessed. I've been around other people through banking and the business career and so forth. That's had an influence on me also.
Is there maybe one in particular that had more influence?
Yes, probably so. But there've been several of them because I think we're the average of the 5 to 10 people we spend the most time with. There's and he's a very private individual, but my friend Jim Brown from Abington. Jim graduated Virginia Tech in engineering, and by age 29 he helped start a bank, which he hired me to be second at the bank. And he's still a friend today and a supporter. And like I am, he's an avid reader. You would never know it. And he's been successful in many different businesses, and from financial to horse breeding, just so many different fields that he's accomplished in. So he's one of them. But then I've got an attorney, Bob Johnson, who I've known for 17 years. As a freshman at the University of Michigan, he had the highest grade point average of anybody in the college at the University of Michigan. Exactly 20 years before that, his father had the same honor bestowed on him. And Bob actually worked 33 years in Chicago for a large law firm who still represents us. Happens to be K.L. Gates, which is Bill Gates' father. They kind of do it as an honorary thing for us because they represented W. Clement Stone, who was our chairman. Clement was a billionaire, they say, and he's the guy that gave me my job. And so them people, and of course my father, only a 7th grade education, but product of the Depression. And I asked him once why he only went to 7th grade. I basically was called a smart aleck because that's as far as a teacher went. Closest high school was 10 or 12 miles and no buses. So, they went to work at 14 in the mine so they could feed the family. So, but he did study and all. He could read blueprints, he could fix anything, and I can't drive a nail. So, and he worked as an electrician in coal mines and worked during the shipyard during the war. So he was very influential on, like I'm saying, I think cigarettes were 20 cents or something like that. And he said, now you can smoke if you want to, but now here's how much money it's going to cost you over a lifetime. He said, plus it's not good for health. Nobody in my family smokes. I got 3 brothers and sisters and my mom. None of us smoke. None of our children smoke. So they set some good examples for us, though it might not have been that they could give us a college education or send us to Harvard. I learned a lot from them. So I've been blessed to be around some terrific individuals, and just like Jim Stovall, only a few years ago, just a tremendous story. And I tell the story about Jim because he's done 30 some odd books. He's done 500 scholarships at Oral Roberts University. His dad worked there 55 years. He was blind in college. He would have been playing in pro football if he hadn't been. He was Olympic college heavyweight weightlifter twice. Couldn't pass the physical for football because the doc will have to correct me, but it's macular degeneration or what they call it, slowly going blind. And so he told his dad, I'm going to work for myself. And his dad said, son, I don't know nothing about business. What are you going to do? And he said, I don't know. Well, he said, here at Oral Roberts University, there's a guy named Lee Braxton. He said, Lee's a terrific individual. He said, he's a businessman. And said, I'm going to introduce you to him. And said, he's been supporting Oral Roberts University for a long time. And the first thing that Lee asked him, he said, have you ever read Think and Grow Rich? And now he was losing his eyesight at that time. He said, no. He said, take the book and read it and come back and see me. So he read it and goes back. And he said, now go read it again. So he mentored to him. And he got into selling stocks. And they would ask him how he did it. And he'd tell it. And they kept asking him more. So he got up on his nerve, well, they'll pay me a little for some of my trouble. So they kept asking him, and today he gets $50,000 for a 1-hour presentation. He's booked up for 2 years. And he come to see me here at the college and speak to the kids. We brought all the cool kids in the area, packed the convocation center at the college. And when I introduced him, he told the audience, I said, I want to tell you something about Don. He said, if Don asks you to do something, just go ahead. Because he said, you're going to do it. and he got a good life out of it. But he spoke for free, and I've done. But I called him. I read one of his books one time, years ago. And I called him and said, Mr. Stovall, I said, told him who I was, and I said, I know I read in your book you was mentored by Lee Braxton, and you praised the book Think and Grow Rich. Did you know that Mr. Braxton delivered Napoleon Hill's eulogy? He said, I did not know that. He said, Lee Braxton's daughter's still living and she supports the university. She's a retired professor. He said, I did not know that. So we stayed in contact. So one day I told him, Jim, you've been writing a column for about 20 years. I've been reading it for a long time. It's called Jim Stovall's Wisdom for Winners. And I said, I could take those columns and I could compose books out of them and I'll split the money with you. He said, no, I couldn't do that. He said, if you want to do the books, he said, you get your attorney, prepare a letter, and I'll sign all those to you and I'll furnish them to you. And he said, but the money's all yours. He said, I have one request. And I said, what's that? And he said, you do the introduction and do an endorsement. I said, I can do that. He said, I'll get the other ones. The other two people he got to endorse it was Donald Trump and Steve Forbes. And when I showed my daughter the first book, she said, them two guys are in good company. Of course, she's my only daughter, so you can understand that. If you got girls, you can understand that. And so that's how it come about. And 8 of his books is in movies. Ultimate Gift, it's about leaving a legacy, which I think well-to-do people should read. It's a novel, but it sold 5 million copies. It was made into a movie. It grossed more than $100 million. It was the last movie that James Garner filmed. You know, the old guy played, Bat Masterson and some other stuff. And see that Angela Breslin, and I can't remember who the other character was, played in the movie. But he's had 8 of his books turned into movies, and he's just wrote a book. They're getting ready to start filming on now. But I've done 3 books out of his columns. One of them's laid on there, Wisdom for Winners. And I've got a 4th in composal. Probably won't come out until 2018. But as I tell the students, it all come about reading. If I had not read, I would never know who Lee Stovall was, Jim Stovall was, and knew who Lee Braxton was if I had not read. And I said, sometimes our ship don't come in. Sometimes we have to swim out where it is. And I give the example. I spoke at Powell one time. It's an old Presbyterian church where I go to. They furnish a room for a historical thing, and it's a poor bunch. I mean, they asked me to come speak because someone had heard me talk about Napoleon Hill. 2 things I remember. That's been many years ago. One is they didn't pay me, and the other didn't even feed me. It was just. But there was a nice incident in it. There was a lady came up and said, I talked about hitchhiking to school, and a guy picked me up. His name was Oliver Powers. And Oliver was the father of Gary Francis Powers that got shot down over Russia. And this is the period of time I'm going to school. He was always talking about his son, and so forth. Said he worked for the government weather reconnaissance. It's a little bit more than that. He was leaving Turkey and flying U-2s over Russia, and he had made hundreds of trips. He got braver and braver as a single engine. I never met him, but I met his son, and his son, Gary Jr. We stay in touch. But those things come about from reading. So that night when I came back, I keep a pad by my desk, on my nightstand, and I sit down and I wrote Mr. Stone, chairman of the board of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. I told him I'd give a talk. Of course, I listened to one of the tapes on going over and back, audio, cassette. And I wrote him, and he wrote me back, and he said, I would like to have dinner with you. He said, could you fly to Chicago? I'll pay you expenses. And of course, meeting Mr. Stone, you know, I know the time he died, he'd give away $450 million. And he actually started the foundation. He gave him $500,000 in '62 to get the books published and kind of get organized into a nonprofit. And he was chairman up till he died at age 100. And so I was thrilled to meet him, and we talked and had lunch at the airport. He knew somebody that one of the airlines had offices there, and he said, He was probably 80-something. He lived to be 100, and I was invited to his, it wasn't a funeral, celebration of life. People like Paul Harvey was there. Robert Schuller that founded the Lighthouse Cathedral out in California. It was like the Church of the World one time. Stone gave him his first $1 million to get him started. And Paul Harvey, I said, was there. He delivered the eulogy. And Nixon, I believe Nixon's whole cabinet was there because he was a conservative Republican. And I met a lot of those guys. But as I tell the students and all, if I hadn't have read that and ventured out and wrote that, I would not have been sitting here today, because he wrote me back and asked me to come up there. And then he told me, he called me, I wasn't no young one, but he called me and said, boy, you know more about these books than I do. He said, you ought to be a board member. And I said, Mr. Stone, and everybody called him Mr. Stone. The only person I ever heard call him, and you look at my office door, is a picture of him and Ronald Reagan. Reagan called him Clem. Nobody else called him Clem. He was Mr. Stone. And there's a picture of my office that says, to Clem, my dear friend Ronald Reagan made it to the White House because he was a terrific contributor to conservative causes.
Now, this is W. Clement Stone
Yeah,
that co-authored the book with Napoleon Hill, Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude.
That's the one.